Welcome to the September the 5th, 2006 taping of It Happened in Grand Prairie, as we bring you the history of our wonderful city and some of the people that have made the history. And this is our history tape number 580. And that's a lot of history tapes, but this is a very, very important one today because we've entitled it Arts to the Arts Council. And that has a lot of hyphens and a little dots in between it because we began with a little bit of the history of the arts in Grand Prairie, Texas, as some of us from the old timers remember it in the days gone by. We did not go back past the 1950s, but we thought maybe that you might like to have a little bit of the history of the Arts Council because it is very active today. It's getting ready to move into a new home in possibly 2007, and it really is important to them because they have been looking for a home for a very long time. And the reason we know this in our research for this historical happening today, we did pick up a paper from 1985, and we thought we would like to show and tell this for you because this has December 1985. And guess what it says on the front page of the Grand Prairie News? The Grand Prairie Theater finds a home. Now, that was very exciting news then because history had gone back a long time before that, and we wanted to bring you up to the 1985 with your permission. And then we're going to introduce a very special lady that is now hooked onto the Arts Council, hook, line, and sinker. Libby Clausen, we want to welcome you to the set as we document this history of your Arts Council, as we call it, as the Executive Director. Are you going to claim it today?
Yes, ma'am, I will, for all the people who've come before me, though, not just for me. Lots of people in town have contributed to get the Arts Council where it is today, and I'm pleased to be able to represent them.
Now, I understand that you're number 3 Executive Director, the third one that we've had.
Yes, ma'am.
Would you like to name the others and the dates of that they were with us? Because I believe we have all of that documentation here.
Well, the Arts Council was originally, it was in 1979, which you'll go back in the history, and it's been run completely by volunteers. No one was paid up until they realized the organization was handling a lot more money and more programming than volunteers needed to handle. And in 1996, they hired a gentleman by the name of Bill Bias, who was a very creative, artistic person who served as the first executive director. And at that time, the executive director also directed and produced all of the plays that went on.
You didn't get an outside director or your choice. You took the executive.
The executive director directed and produced the shows and then brought in everybody that was needed under him. So Bill Bias did that for about 1.5 years.
And he was good, wasn't he?
He was excellent, yes. He did a lot of great things for the Arts Council and really built up the theater end of it at that time.
All right.
At that time, they were officing in the Chamber of Commerce building. And when Bill took it over, he moved them into a small office in Park Oak Plaza over on Pioneer, just a small little office. All of the stuff was stored in one end and he had an office area in the other end.
Yes.
And then in 1998, Margaret Cunningham Lowe was the executive director, and she was there for about 1.5 years, officed at Park Oak Plaza and continued the things that Bill had done. She was also very artistic. She had been a teacher in the Grand Prairie schools. So she also, as executive director, served as director and producer of all the theater productions as well. Well, then in 2000, they found me. Keith Head, who I had been on the school board with, found me, and I had a background in public relations and advertising.
Yeah.
So they basically brought me on in a part-time. They had it full-time executive directors, and with nonprofit funding being cut in every direction back then.
That put it in jeopardy.
Yes, it did. So they had to find someone who would just do the job part-time. And at that time, I had been a stay-at-home mom in a community volunteer for 10 years with my kids, so he asked me if I would come on board as a public relations person and run the office. So the first thing we did was close down the Park Oak office to save us some money. I moved the office into my home, which works out great for me with my kids. So the dining room in my home works out great as an office, have everything I need. And then the city was gracious enough to give us an old building in Turner Park that they were going to do away with because it's really not habitable. It's the old Junior Achievement Building.
Yes.
And we use that to store all of the things that we need to do, everything we do throughout the year.
Yes.
And so I started in 2000, and this is my 6th year as executive director. They must have run the other 2 off, but they can't seem to run me off. So I'm still here.
Are you part-time, or are you a full executive director now?
Well, I tell people it's a full-time job on part-time pay.
That's it.
They can't afford to pay me what you would pay an executive director, but that's okay. I do it because I love what I do, and I love doing it for the city, and I love the people I work with.
And you certainly don't want to be the director of all of the different things that you have going on in the Arts Council today. You would have to hire 15 people to help you do all of that.
Well, and that is what happened. The first 2 people that they had as executive director were artistic and ran the plays as well. I have had no theater experience. I have a minor in art, visual art.
Yes.
Had never done a theater production, so I couldn't possibly have done that. But it seems to have worked out well because I don't mind running the business end and the office part and doing the public relations. And there are plenty of folks on the Arts Council board and in the community that we can hire as artistic people.
And that's wonderful.
And they can handle that, and I can handle the things that the artists don't necessarily want to handle. So it works out really well that way.
I believe that you also have built the Arts Council into a monumental phase of arts, because you don't do just theater anymore. Tell me some of the programs that you do other than theater.
Well, the Arts Council has really gone through transition. There's always been theater.
Yes.
There seems to have always been
A visual arts.
the Visual Arts Association, which has changed over the years, and now
Yes.
it's the Association of Grand Prairie Artists.
Uh-huh.
The Grand Prairie Music Teachers Association seems to go way back, and our association
Yeah,
with them.
yeah.
There has been a civic chorus, or an
Yeah.
off and on. Right now, that's not active. There seems to have been an orchestra off and on, and we
Yeah.
now have the Children of the Strings Orchestra, which is doing real well. And in the past, there's been a band, which we have the orchestra instead of the band. But we've expanded children's programming quite a bit.
Yes.
We do more in the visual arts. We have outdoor concert series that they've never had before. We basically, anything that the community says they would like to have, we try to find something for them. We invite people to bring us new programming and new ideas. So we went from doing 5 or 6 things a year to we have something almost every month of the year now.
Do you still do poetry?
You know, our poetry group is not active right now. We had a literary poetry group
Yes,
that met at the Brass Bean for a while.
Yeah.
The people who really directed that kind of backed off, so that's inactive right now. We do have a Storyteller and Listeners Guild that's going really strong.
Oh,
that
that's
a lot
good.
of those poetry people joined the Storytellers Guild.
So you're meeting the needs of almost everything culturally that anyone in Grand Prairie would like to have an active part in. If they bring you a new idea, you'll even try that on Precise, right?
We sure will, and we invite them. We really want people to come in, and if there's a group that they want, get that group started, head it up, and we will support them in any way we can. Instead of the Arts Council controlling it all, we like for the people who know that type of venue to produce that. Like our Storytellers Guild, that's run by the storytellers, and we just advertise them and give them a place to tell their stories. But if there's something in the community that is needed, we are more than happy to supply that. So it's whatever the community wants us to be is what we want to be.
All right, now we're going to go back into time just a little bit. Now, I did show this 1985 newspaper showing that they found a place to meet. We're going to talk about that as soon as I give you the background history. We're going to talk about your wishes for a new place that we really want, a place for the performing arts and for the visual arts and for the other things that are happening culturally in Grand Prairie, Texas. But I wanted to begin with some of the things that I had a little bit of history on. Back in the 1940s, I remember Roger and Thelma Dickey. They were very, very important folks in town. He and his wife had a TV repair place, and he was into radio, and he had all sorts of wishes, but they belonged to a theater group. I didn't go back to the library and research all of that, but I plan to do that for the next report that we give on this. But then in about the 1952, I did find the first Fine Arts Association with Pat Purcell as the president. And they have a book and where they were doing fine arts, which really was more into what we call the visual arts. And they had the art shows, but as far as I could tell, they never had a juried art show. But I'm going to go into that a little bit more and see all the things that happened in Grand Prairie a long time ago before we had what we called the Active Arts Council. Then I spent about 6 years as the Cultural Arts Chairman for the state PTA down in Austin. And they just thought I was so qualified doing that I finally ended up with the arts chairmanship in the Chamber of Commerce in one of their tenures. And so when it came to the appointment of the bicentennial chairman for Grand Prairie in 1974 to celebrate in 76, I was asked to chair that. And in all of those things in the bicentennial, we used so much wonderful fine arts. We had plays and we had poetry and we had everything that related to the arts in that. And when that was over, when the bicentennial was completed in December 1976, we got a nice letter from the mayor and said it was wonderful, thank you for everything. And I went back to the city council and I said, we have so much momentum going. We have all of these people that have worked in the bicentennial. Would you all let us have a historical commission, a Grand Prairie Historic Preservation Commission? And they did. And so I have all of the records at the celebration of that when we got the new, what we call the Historic Preservation Commission. And that lasted about 6 months, and then I knew that we needed something else. So I went back to the council and said, could we add the name Arts in front of the Historic Preservation Commission and be the Arts and Historic Preservation Commission? We got that. And I have some of the minutes of all of those good things. So we got the arts to going, but when the arts are mixed up into the city and they aren't separate, we found out that they weren't doing as well as the arts people wanted to do. So we did ask for a split of that. And that was at the time in 1979 that the Arts Council came into reality with Chuck Edwards as the first president. And I just happen to have a picture of that, and I want you to tell me some of the others in a few minutes that were that. I'm going to hold up another one because we really need to have this. This is dated January the 17th, 1979, and it has Chuck Edwards is signing. If I can hold that beautifully for that, you can see that Chuck Edwards, who was in real estate and who started It's Happening in Grand Prairie with Ruthie Jackson, and we had this television show going, but the show was not going then. This is in 1979, and it was 85 before we ever got started, 81 before we ever got started in the television business. But Chuck was very, very excited about this, and he became our very first Arts Council president. And because in 1978 it says Grand Prairie Cultural Arts Council is slated. They had already decided that they wanted to have something really great coming down the pike, and this is when they were inaugurated. So we have everything going really well with the Arts Council coming on board. But what happened? The Grand Prairie Community Theater and all of that sometimes had different things on their mind, and they separated on and off from the Arts Council. And I don't have all of their records, but I do have the Grand Prairie Community Theater in the 80s was directed by David Galvan, Robin Whitlock, and Hicks did a wonderful job. And Susan was the president, Susan Sisney was the president, and John helped her husband in 85. And so that fine arts organization was also going separately from the theater. But that wonderful Arts Council hung in there like mad, even though they separated and moved. And do you know about all of the different transitions from 1979 up until this time, or is your do you have a list of the people that maybe were president?
Well, I do know that the community theater was separate. They were for a while in the old broom factory, the Anderson building.
Yeah.
And they worked separate from the Arts Council. And then I know you found out that they were then in a funeral home, which then became a church. So the theater has had a home in different places separate from the Arts Council. In the 80s is when they came to the Arts Council because they could no longer fund what they were doing, and asked, can we become part of the Arts Council? So instead of the community theater being a separate entity, it's now a standing committee within the Arts Council and run under the umbrella of the Arts Council, yes. And I think that's worked out so much better because then the funding from the two can be put together and support each other much more closely.
Well, I know that when I did show you this, that the Grand Prairie Theater found a new home in '85, they moved in to the building that was a funeral home on the corner of Small Hill Drive and 8th Street. And that was a beautiful, beautiful funeral home. But did they always enjoy having their theater there? I think that you heard that they had...
I've heard stories from Denise Rodrigue and Jerry Vaughn, who both have been part of the theater from back in the 70s when those original people ran at the Broom Factory. And they didn't like working in that funeral home because I was told, this is just stories I've heard, the backstage area, weird things would happen back there. They say lights would turn on and off and things would move, and they don't really like to talk about it much. And so one day I do want to sit down with them and try to get them to tell me the stories, because they said they would not work in a funeral home again, is what they told me.
Well, the wonderful part about that is that funeral home, after the theater left, became other things, and it is now a Baptist church, and I know that they love it there, so they must fit in real well with the hereafter or whatever was happening there that was giving them concerns. And that place, I thought it was wonderful that the theater had transitioned from a funeral home to a theater and a church, and life goes on, doesn't it? That's wonderful.
And churches seem to work real well. The Arts Council's worked real closely with churches because it's funny, they've had two homes and haven't ever had a permanent place to be, but churches always seem to be real receptive. We've used church auditoriums a lot and worked out real well with them. And I will tell you, the last show that we did Blythe Spirit.
Yes.
I believe it was in 2001. And we did that in city council chambers. And we felt like that show was cursed from the beginning, and it had to do with spirits. So we decided after that point we wouldn't do any more shows that involved spirits.
That's
because
good.
we had more things go wrong on that show, and they likened it back to working in the funeral home. So we decided we would stay away from shows with ghosts or spirits in them after that.
Well, you have a list of a few of the presidents that followed Chuck Edwards. Would you give us those, and maybe some of the different places that the theater and your cultural activities have been housed? I know of at least 5 different places you've had. I'd like for you to name all of those if you can remember those.
Okay. Well, presidents and people who have been involved with the Arts Council, it's like a who's who in Grand Prairie. We're so fortunate to have so many people interested in the arts for so long, which is why the Arts Council has been going.
These were volunteers, right?
Yes, everyone is a volunteer. I'm the only paid staff they've ever had, other than when we hire directors and producers for shows, we pay them a stipend, which is not much for what they do. Other than that, everyone is volunteer. Mildred Walker, Georgia Clemson, your daughter, was the president in 1990 and so involved in keeping it alive for so long. Cindy Smith, Keith Head, Noble Holbert, and Rob Goff.
Or some of the
ones. Or just a few of the people. But I can tell you, just about everybody in town who's a who's who has at some point been involved with the Arts Council. Not on the board, they've always been members and supportive.
Now tell me some of the places you've been housed.
Well, I can tell you, they've been in the Anderson building.
All right.
They've been in that funeral home. They have not had a permanent home in a really long time. So we worked in the Thorne building down on Main Street. We have had shows in 2 different empty office spaces in Kim Thorne's building. We work outside in Turner Park, of course.
City
we work
Hall.
outside, yes ma'am, we've done City Hall. We have been in just about every school that you can be in, elementary, middle school, and high schools. We've been in the Black Box Theater. We've been in the school auditorium. Of course, Chambers Auditorium has housed the Grand Prairie Summer Musical, which was also part of the community theater that Earl Tom Keel started, and it began at Mountain View College for a venue. And in 1986, they asked the Arts Council, would they pay for the funding if they brought the summer musical back to Grand Prairie?
Yes.
So Mr. Earl Tom Keel and Dr. Denise Rodrigue brought that to Chambers Auditorium in 86, I believe is the year. And it's been there ever since at Chambers Auditorium. So that's been a great partnership. There would be no other place to do a musical of that size.
Yes.
So Chambers Auditorium is always what we use in the summer. We've worked in outside venues, schools. First Methodist Church has always been so accommodating. And Westridge Baptist Church has allowed us to have auditions and rehearsals there. And I'm sure there are lots of other churches that we have worked in that were before my time. I know the first I had to do with the Arts Council was in 1999 when they did Annie. And that was at South Grand Prairie High in the Keel Theater.
Yes.
So they have been all over since then. And then it was just a year, 2 years later that they asked me to run the organization.
Yes. And you've been looking for a place ever since.
Well, I feel like the Arts Council's been looking for a place since 1979. They've tried to get the Uptown before, several different opportunities to rent it, to buy it, and it has never worked out. The city's tried to buy it before, and it just never worked out. This time, it worked out, and it was, gosh, I think it's been 4 years ago when the talks really started on the Uptown, and 2 years ago when the city was able to purchase it from Donna Easterling. And it has taken 2 years to get to this point, to where the Uptown is going to be a permanent home for the arts in Grand Prairie. But we do hope only the beginning of a permanent home. We like people to know in the master plan at Veterans Park out at Warrior Trail and Robinson, there is an acreage for a cultural arts center. And we do envision, we still want the city to plan on someday putting a really big cultural arts center out there that would house plenty of theater space, workshop space, museum space, gallery space, all kinds of things. So in the future, we envision there being too much to fill the Uptown with, and that we need that permanent location as well.
When are you going to get in the Uptown? When is Marshall Warder Jr. going to let you in?
Spring of '08 is what they're telling us, so that's what I'm going with. They're going to work on the facade. It's going to be put back just like it was when it opened in the 50s. And that's supposed to happen this fall of 2007. And then we have been told it will open in the spring of '08. And it just so happens that that's the 20th anniversary of the summer musical. And some people are saying, wouldn't it be nice to go back and do Oklahoma again that first summer, which was the first one they did when it came back to Grand Prairie. So we maybe have that to look forward to.
Well, since 1979, when the Arts Council actually, they signed the contracts and began, in '09, what are you going to do?
Oh gosh.
We're going to celebrate.
Once we have a permanent home, we would like to do 4 or 5 community theater productions a year. Right now we do 2 to 3 if we can find a venue. 4 to 5 theater productions plus the big summer musical. We want to do our children's theater, of course, but we'd like to do additional children's programming, more for kids right there in the Uptown. And with that venue, we could do a whole summer of cultural activities for children like they do in other towns.
All right.
We see a permanent home for the Civic Chorus, because right now we have trouble keeping it going for lack of a permanent place for them to rehearse. So we see there's people in town who want to be part of a civic chorus, and we see that as a permanent home to get it going again. It'll be a great place for orchestra, so we see our student orchestra really turning into a community orchestra. It will be a small gallery space in the lobby, so we hope that the artist will take advantage of that to have rotating exhibits in there all of the time. So we see a full slate. The storytellers, of course. We would like to see on a monthly basis have shows there. Every month there's a different band on a Friday night. There's just an endless possibility of things that the community can do. So we hope through the Arts Council to keep it busy all the time.
All right, now a few minutes ago I saw you just kind of going through a little file that you have over to the side there, and you said, oh, I didn't know they had ever done this musical or this play. Name me some of the things we've done in the past that you may one day want to revive.
Well, I was seeing here, this is the 10th anniversary of the Arts Council was in 1989, and here's a full list of things that they have done. Arsenic and Old Lace, which we've done before. They did Our Town, A Little Night Music, Suddenly Last Summer, and Harvey. So that was the 10th anniversary. The 20th anniversary of the Arts Council in 1999, they opened with Bluebonnet Brass, which was a musical group. And they did Steel Magnolias, which we have since done, and they did Annie in 1999. And It's a Wonderful Life, which is always a great show. We have not done that one again. And I found it interesting. I found this one in 1989. They did Oklahoma. They've done it twice. And then they also did You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown, which I did not know they had done in '89 because we just did that in 2004. So I thought that was interesting that they had done that. So the classics keep coming back up, I'm finding. And then they had also done in 1991, they did Bye Bye Birdie, which we did in 2005. So the good classic shows that the community enjoys.
You can repeat them after about 10 years,
That's
5
right.
years or so.
They keep coming back up. So it's
Yeah.
really interesting to look through. The reason theater has been so important to the Arts Council, that's really the only moneymaker. That's where you can generate ticket sales.
Yes.
Most everything else we do is free. And the reason we can do that for free is because we can charge for tickets to the theater. So that's why the theater is so important to be able to provide the visual art show, which we have a juried art show that is open and free, and we provide prizes for. We do 3 student art shows a year that we provide funding for Martin Luther King and Cinco de Mayo, and now for the Grand Prairie Unity Week doing an art show. Our concert series in April and now in October, that's all free. So to be able to afford the things for free and a very reduced rate, theater has always been important to the Arts Council.
And they love theater, don't they?
Yes.
Don't you have 2 that are interested, or maybe all 3?
I have 2 daughters that are interested. Carly and Ruth Ann are both interested in theater. My son Jan will just help us move things around if he's
Like
asked
your
to.
sweet husband that's on the airport board. Bless his heart, he has moved you around for 6 years, hasn't he?
Yes, he has. He certainly has. Along with Jerry Vaughn, who's been building sets in every place imaginable, and all of our volunteers boards over the year. Keith Head, who was so active for years, who has now moved to Fort Worth, but he still comes back to come to the shows.
And
So
to
they've
help
all
move a few things now and then.
They have been moving things since 1979.
All right,
So,
we have 1.5 minutes for you to look out into your camera and thank everyone that's done a volunteer thing for you in the past and give them what for.
well, the Arts Council does go back to 1979, and I just feel fortunate to be here and have been here for 6 years, and hopefully to be the one here when the Uptown opens in 2008. And the entire city has been behind the Arts Council since 1979. So many people. If we didn't mention you in this show, we'd love for you to get in touch with us as we're putting together the history of the Arts Council. Any information you can provide, we would love to have. So if you would visit our website, our email address is on there, gpac@artsgp.com, or if you would call us if you have information you want to give to us, it's 972-642-ARTS, which is 642-2787. And the arts are alive and well in Grand Prairie, thanks to going all the way back to 1979 to Earl Tom Keel and Georgia Clemson and Chuck Edwards, and the list goes on and on of those who have started it and kept it going, and that's why we're here in 2006, looking forward to a permanent home in 2008 for the community.
All right. That's the Uptown Theater, and where is it located?
It's on Main Street, of course. You won't be able to miss it. When they get it all lit up in the fall, you will not be able to miss it. You drive downtown and you will see the Uptown Theater. It is going to be something to see. So it's on Main Street, down near Center. You just won't be able to miss it. And also in October, if people will come to our concert series on Main Street in October, the Uptown is just down the street from where we do our October concert series.
Thank you, Libby Clausen. It's wonderful for you to help us end a history show. And history is as we live and do. And the main thing is that we document it correctly.